Stephen Hawking. Let's start with that. Stephen Hawking passed away yesterday. He was fascinating. I won't pretend that I understand this, but this was fascinating. Hawking's first major breakthrough, I'm quoting now from The Guardian. Hawking's first major breakthrough came in 1970 when he and Roger Penrose applied the mathematics of black holes to the universe and showed that a singularity, a region of infinite curvature in space-time, lay in our distant past, the point from which came the Big Bang. Penrose found he was able to talk with Hawking even as the latter's speech failed. Hawking, he said, had an absolute determination to not let anything get in the way. He thought he didn't have long to live, and he really wanted to get as much done at that time. That was in 1970, so that's awesome. Up living till 2018. So, obviously...
That's a good innings, as the Brits say.
Indeed. So, obviously, a brilliant scientific mind, and an open one, too. Obviously a skeptic, not religious, but really, his public interventions on those questions, I thought, owed more to Carl Sagan and that sort of cosmic openness and endless inquiry than some of the sort of dogmatism that we see in the off-putting atheist pop culture. Just an incredibly admirable, amazing guy. And he also had deep, profound, and strong and personally grounded political convictions. This is Stephen Hawking speaking in August 2017. He's attacking Jeremy Hunt, who at the time, and I think he actually still is, was head of the health service in the Tory government. Now, of course, the Tories are, under Cameron and May, have implemented relentless, brutal austerity, which has increased poverty and inequality in the UK, and they have also schemed to privatize, undermine, and deter the National Health Service, which is a unbelievable global accomplishment and incredible service that all UK citizens enjoy. And Stephen Hawking intervened in August 2017.
Wouldn't be here today if it were not for the NHS. I have received a large amount of high-quality NHS treatment, without which I would not have survived. I have had a lot of experience of the NHS, and the care I received has enabled me to live my life as I want, and to contribute to major advances in our understanding of the universe. It is important that care is available, without any of the added burdens for people that come with private health insurance. Hunt has cherry-picked research. Speaking as a scientist, cherry-picking evidence is unacceptable. Public figures abuse scientific argument, citing some studies but suppressing others, to justify policies that they want to implement for other reasons. It debases scientific culture.
That actually is not only the perfect moral case, that's the perfect summary of all conservative and neoliberal policymaking. Cherry picking, and at least I guess in the UK they still are cherry picking. They don't do that here anymore. They just lie. But the cherry picking of evidence, the distortion of reality to fit a pre-existing agenda to favor the wealthy and the privileged is conservative policymaking, is neoliberal policymaking. That's the purpose. He laid it out perfectly there. And of course, it debases humanity, it debases science, and it debases our culture. And I would also like to add, fuck you, Jeremy Hunt.
It's interesting to me how some people go right and that are interested in science, because that's really what drove me to the left, like realizing what fossil fuel companies were doing about climate science,
right?
Things like that. Like I don't really understand how you don't go that way.
I think part of the dividing line, though, is politics, because I think that it is an awareness, like the people who have this scientism fetish don't ever think politically. They're the people that don't seem to have an understand. Like they don't go to questions of like, well, who funded that research, or why, or how is this being deployed? I remember one time, I forget who wrote this, but somebody quoted some Dawkins line, and Dawkins basically, he's very Dawkins, like, if you want to believe that, if something to the effect, I'm grossly paraphrasing, but something to the effect of like, if you want to believe that jetliners are run on magic carpets, like, that's your prerogative, but we in science are going to do the actual research to figure out, how aerodynamics work or whatever. And the response was like, okay, well, of course, it's obvious that science and research and innovation established that industry and that scientific reality of air travel. But if you don't think that air travel was influenced by military spending, by business, by trade routes, I mean, you're looking at this thing in utter isolation of all of the collective things that push political, economic, scientific, and individual reality. So it seems to me that there's always this kind of that guys that, and they usually are guys that get really lost in that trap. They just have one metric for looking at reality, and they think it will solve for everything, and it won't. And they don't like any messiness that interferes with, that's why, he's far from the worst offender, and, he just does kind of irritate me a bit. But like the Neil deGrasse Tyson, like that neurotic need to like intervene at every arbitrary, like actually New Year's means nothing. It's like, well, right.
And while taking shots at the humanities.
Yeah, it's all right. The dangerous and pernicious thing is taking shots at the humanities, and that's the colonial mindset of scientism. It's just like, like, why do we have novels when we can read each other's brains? It's like, or whatever, But the broader, but even short of that broader problem, just that kind of like weird tick, like, yes, like humans assign meanings to things. That's true. Like, in a certain way, in a certain sense, like, yeah, like Dyson's life and my life and your life are completely, utterly meaningless and don't matter at all in a cosmic big picture sense. They're specks of dust floating for a second in the grand scheme of things. We still assign meaning to it, and that's a good thing. That's what we
all
do.
Meaning is.
That's culture.
But there's no meaning besides that. That's what meaning means.
That is literally, and even, by the way, people who actually have very sophisticated religious views would actually agree with that. So this kind of like notion that you're doing something or proving something or moving culture forward because you're sort of like neurotically mining culture for quote unquote irrationality is, I think that's where the mishaps.
I feel like ultimately though, like you can't avoid this stuff anymore. You can't avoid what's happening with science or what's happening with like NHS and like or even economists, like all this stuff.
Well, that's another. Economists is
obviously not
that's
science,
an
but
perfect field because it's not right exactly because it's not exactly it's not a science. It's a social science. In many ways, actually, really philosophy with graphs that have been funded by business to advance certain policies, and that's if you can't get to that, then you can't get to reality. You're calling for